For the longest time, the main question was pretty simple. What size? But that's all changing. Right now, a huge technological revolution is completely rewriting the rulebook. We're shifting away from focusing just on looks to a whole new era that's all about safety, long-term health, and believe it or not, data. So let's dive into this massive shift happening in the breast implant industry.
Okay, think about this for a second. Imagine being told that there's almost a 1 in 5 chance of a really painful complication with a medical procedure. For decades, that was the reality, a 12 to 18% risk of what's called capsular contracture. It's where scar tissue gets hard and painful around the implant was just accepted. It was seen as part of the deal.
So yeah, that was the trade-off for a very long time. But what happens when some new technology comes along and just refuses to accept that risk as normal? What finally changed? What broke the mold?
To really get what's happening now, we first have to understand how things used to be. For most of modern history, the breast implant market wasn't exactly a hotbed of innovation. It was basically an industry of giants, dominated by just a couple of major players.
On one side, you have the incumbents, the old guard, Johnson & Johnson and AbbVie. These two have run the show for decades. But that long reign kind of led to stagnation. They were so busy defending their turf and dealing with old lawsuits about safety that, frankly, they weren't really pushing the technology forward. The innovation had pretty much stalled since the 90s.
But just like in any good story, into this stable, maybe even stale market comes a classic disruptor, a new challenger that isn't built on legacy, but on pure data, science, and a totally different vision for women's health.
And that disruptor is a company called Establishment Labs, or ESTA for short. Now, these guys didn't just want to build a slightly better implant. No, they wanted to completely redefine what an implant is. Their whole philosophy is built on 3 main pillars: solid, verifiable clinical data, a deep focus on something called biocompatibility, and weaving digital tech into the very fabric of the device. And check this out. This slide really shows you what ESTA's all about. You see the Motiva implant itself, but look closely at that tiny logo. That's actually an RFID microtransponder. Then you see the reader, which can scan it right through the skin, no surgery needed. And finally, there's a patient app on a phone. This basically turns the implant from a passive object into a connected, trackable piece of personal technology. It's a huge leap.
Now, at the very heart of all this is that concept I mentioned, biocompatibility. It sounds complicated, but it's really simple. How well does a foreign object get along with your body? ESTA's big innovation here is their patented smooth silk surface. They've designed it to be so smooth and uniform at a microscopic level that the body barely recognizes it's there. The whole goal is to minimize that inflammatory response that causes all the problems, like capsular contracture.
So what's the payoff for all this high-tech engineering? Well, remember that scary 12 to 18% risk we started with? Get this. According to 5 years of clinical data, the rate of capsular contracture for Motiva implants is just 0.5%, 0.5%. That's not just a small improvement, it's a total game changer for patient safety. It's the kind of number that sends shockwaves through an entire industry.
So let's just quickly recap ESTA's 3-pronged attack here. First, you've got that smooth silk surface for better biocompatibility. Second, there's the Quidlid and Zen digital system, which gives patients this incredible ability to track their own device. And third, they've even rethought the surgery itself with something called Mia Femtech, a technique that can be done with an incision that's less than an inch long. It's innovation across the board.
Okay, so this tech disruption isn't just a science project. It is having a massive impact on the business side of things. Let's follow the money and look at the 2025 financial data, because it tells this incredible story of a David versus 2 Goliaths.
All right, let's break down these 2025 numbers. First, look at ESTA. They brought in over $211 million. But the jaw-dropping number is in that growth column, a massive 27.2% increase from the year before, mostly because they're now in the US market. Now compare that to the incumbents. AbbVie's aesthetics unit actually went down by 1.1%, and J&J's unit grew by just 3%. The data could not be clearer.
And if the table didn't paint a clear enough picture, this bar chart just screams it at you. Look at that skyscraper of a bar for EST, showing that explosive growth. And then you see the other 2 bars for the big guys, they're practically flat. This is literally what technological disruption looks like on a spreadsheet. So what's behind this massive gap in performance? Well, it all comes down to strategy. ESTA is playing aggressive offense. They're pouring every dollar into R&D and breaking into new markets, even if it hurts their profits in the short term. Meanwhile, the incumbents are playing defense. J&J is busy with huge acquisitions in totally different fields, and AbbVie is trying to protect its big cash cow drugs from patent expiration. They're distracted, and ESTA is laser-focused on winning this one market.
Okay, this industry battle is fascinating from a business perspective. But let's bring it back to what really matters. What does all of this actually mean? For you, for patients? How does this great shift from size to safety change the game for individuals?
What it means is that the conversation you can have with your surgeon is now on a whole different level. The kinds of questions you should be asking are way more sophisticated and data-driven than they've ever been before.
So if you or anyone you know is considering a procedure, here are the new questions you are now empowered to ask. Don't just talk about size. Ask for the 5-year, 10-year clinical data on safety and complications. Ask if the implant has digital traceability. Ask if there are minimally invasive options. And definitely ask about the specific technology of the implant surface and how it's designed to work with your body.
And ultimately, that's what this new era is really all about. It's about shifting the power and the information right back into your hands. Technology like this isn't just about safety statistics. It's about empowerment. It's about giving you direct, verifiable access to your own health information.
So, what's the big picture takeaway here? To get an expert's take on all this, let's turn to the HDIN Research analysis that forms the basis of this whole explainer.
And here it is. The analysts basically see ESTA's whole strategy as a high-stakes gamble. They're using their clear tech advantage to try and turn an entire industry upside down. But the challenge is huge. They're going up against incredibly powerful, deeply entrenched giants who are not going to give up their market share without a serious fight. It's the classic battle, innovation versus scale.
So this great shift in the breast implant industry, it's not on the horizon anymore. It is here, right now. The conversation has officially moved from size to science. The question has changed from how do I want to look to what technology am I comfortable putting in my body? And as safety and tech continue to merge, the most important question is the one only you can answer. How will you choose?